right now.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to today's session. Many thanks to those who have been supporting Gronthee's beautiful initiative, the conversation series, and also the poetry series. One is called 100 Poets Around the World for Love. And as you know, poets from all different corners, all different cultures are joining as part of the series, which is making a good amalgamation, good merging, a good association from poets from one corner of the world to the other corners of the world. And that is perhaps the aim of art and culture. And many thanks who have supported this, who have been sharing this stream and letting others be the part of these activities. And also, Gronthee has started another initiative, which is in conversation with philosophers, poets, filmmakers, dancers from global arena. As part of the series, as you know, we have already featured one of the finest interpreters of Indian cinema in the world, Sri Buddhadev Dasgupta, one of the finest interpreters of Bangladeshi post-war cinema in the world, Tanvir Mukammal, and many others. And we are planning to interact with leading philosophers, journalists, entrepreneurs, poets, and many thanks those who are inspiring us meaningfully, supporting us, and especially leaving very motivating comments in the common thread, in the live streaming thread. So please do, as usually, please do share this live streaming. This is streaming live from Gronthee's page. And this is also streaming live from the editor of the Gronthee, Shamim Shahan's page. And this is also streaming live from now my profile as well. And I'm sure it will be streaming live from Shodho and other partners page as well. Let me perhaps have just 1 second and let me share this to my email, my Facebook, so that everyone can share. So this is, so as part of this series, as you know, we are so delighted to feature one of the prominent journalists from South Asian background, an entrepreneur, a firm believer of the change through art and culture, Sri Sailesh Ram. So many thanks, Sailesh, for joining, and a warm welcome to today's session.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm very humbled to be asked to do this. I'm used to being on the other side and asking the questions. It's a very strange experience for me.
Exactly. Let's see. I have already sent the link to you through WhatsApp. If you kindly share, because we want audiences joining from all different backgrounds, different.
Sure.
So if you kindly share through your network.
Yes.
Let me also introduce the panel member, the editor of the Gronthee, a poet, and a wonderful friend of mine, Shamim Shahan. Many thanks, Shamim Shahan, for joining, and welcome to today's session.
Thank you. A warm welcome to renowned journalist, fiction writer, Sailesh Ram in this session.
Delighted to be here.
Thank you. Gronthee is delighted to have you as part of our Facebook Live session. Our audience are well aware of experimental literary activities we have been doing for last 30 years. We featured many new and experimental voices since the Gronthee Little Mag has been published, and now we host International Poetry Festival in Britain, which has been presided by so many corners of poetry lovers all around the globe. Our Little Mag is now being published quite regularly and will feature powerful and experimental writing predominantly from South Asian background, but also from other global background too. This live session during this COVID pandemic is a way of interacting with leading writers, poets, filmmakers, journalists, photographers all around the globe. Many thanks, Sailesh, for your time.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shamim Shahan. As our audiences, most of our audiences know, Sailesh Ram. Sailesh was an editor of Eastern Eye, the popular weekly newspaper, and is a contributing editor to the Asian Media Group's AMG special publication. Prior to this, he was an editor of GG2 Life, a glossy unisex lifestyle magazine, and worked for AMG. He has had work published in the Independent and spent the early part of his career on East and several regional titles. After training as a journalist, he first freelanced after getting an MA in continental philosophy from the University of Sussex and a BSc in government and history from LSE. But he is known for his phenomenal journey that he started with Asian culture Vulture, which is quite, the journey started actually almost at the same time when Shodho started his artistic vision, artistic journey, almost same time. And that's how we knew each other. Sailesh, many thanks. I'm just ruminating those memories.
No,
when I email you,
quite a long way, because I was coming to sort of end at Eastern Eye. I'd kind of made a few decisions about moving on, and I had very much had the idea for Asian Culture Vulture, I think, when we spoke, but it was still formulating in my mind. And I know you were setting up Souther, and yeah, it was a kind of similar. We may have been in similar. I mean, you were a bit ahead of me at that time, and I hadn't quite got to that point, and I didn't know whether I was going to be there when you were ready, and I don't even remember exactly the chronology of those events and us meeting.
We will ruminate those memories in this conversation, actually, most of them. But let us start with the question, Sailesh. How are you? First of all, during this pandemic, what do you think the future of this pandemic? What do you think the future of this social distancing? Because you were a student of philosophy as well. And that's probably why we developed a good friendship, a good partnership. Whenever I talk to you, I felt I placed my thing in the right hand, and immediately, oh, Ahmed, I'm intrigued by. Last time, remember, you can't speak to a journalist like this. He sent you a very intellectually written Jivananda Das. You asked me a very intellectual question, and then I answered in completely different dimension that I won't do with a co-journalist, a day-to-day journalist.
Yeah.
And because we have that in-depth understanding in philosophy and poetry, I answered you, and then immediately you said, Ahmed, your answer is very intriguing. I'm going to do a story on this. Poet Jivananda Das, I took an initiative to familiarize and to popularize a great poet of Bengal, Jivananda Das. And then we had a wonderful event in Rich Mix. After Tagore, I think Jivananda Das is the one who should be focused in global platform, because he has that power and capacity. So if you kindly tell us a bit more on your view about the future of the pandemic, first of all, and then also what is the future of this social distancing? Is it again alienating us uh, from others? Yeah.
We mustn't allow it to alienate us. And the great thing about this kind of platform, Zoom and other social media, is the way we can connect globally. You know, we're both talking here in the UK, but there are people all around the world who could be potentially watching and listening, and the opportunity for those connections are incredible. And they are wider now than they ever have been. And there's a good reason for us to try and find like-minded people and connect with people whose interests are similar to our own, and causes and missions and philosophies that we are interested in, and that we also want to promote or support. And let's try and make the world a better place. I mean, it's in a difficult one now, and the pandemic has, in some ways, it should bring us closer, not tear us apart, because we all face the same threat, and we must respond to it in a humanistic way and reach out and be in solidarity. Whether we're rich or poor, you know, wherever we are from the world, in the world, we face the same threat from this disease. And therefore it's important that we come together, and we don't try and just hide in a little corner of and forget our fellow human beings we're all in this, and we all face challenges with it. So I'm very much that the pandemic will help us understand our common humanity.
True, but one thing that I always would like to listen from you, because you are at the source of many newses, and you know the other side of news too. And especially you collaborated with many live festivals, many prestigious live festivals. And as you know, Shodho and the Gronthee is also another leading South Asian literary platform that has always a regular publication, and that promotes new experimental voices. And we do an international poetry festival each year. This year it was supposed to happen in some prestigious venues in London and Oxford University too, but we may have to cancel. So what do you think about the future of these live events? You are getting information from other live festivals also that you collaborated with. So from those input that you have, what are you thinking of? What are you thinking of about live events?
The future still remains very uncertain. It really depends on where we are with the virus. If it's being suppressed and being kept down very low, then there's a chance of having some live physical events in festivals with social distancing obviously in operation. But if the virus is very active and it's rampant, then the possibility of even having any kind of physical event is non-existent, and there has to be digital. I mean, you can keep festivals going through digital platforms. Now, some people feel differently about that. We had the example of Cannes earlier this year, who decided they were not really going to do anything. And the only part of the festival they had was their market, which was online. And I saw a lot of activity connected to that, mainly business and industry of films were doing their normal business online. And instead of being in Cannes doing that work, they were online and communicating, and there were sessions and so forth. But in terms of planning for the future, we don't know. We have to see where the virus goes, what the government advice is, and what is legally permissible, because there are restrictions now on meeting and having events, and it's not like in the time before the pandemic when you can organize things yourself, and there was no real restrictions so long as you followed the general law. But now,
Any prediction from your side, perhaps? Any prediction from your side?
I don't think we can't really predict.
Any prediction from your side? Predict means sort of any when we can. Is it just vaccine? When the vaccine is when vaccine will come in the market, then perhaps we'll be able to do live events. But have you got any prediction about the any time frame when? I mean, whenever you think about live events, we have to think about.
I think you're looking at
2021.
I think that's really people are looking at next year and beginning to plan, but it's all still a little bit uncertain. And I was reading about festivals that are going to be starting in January, and they don't really know. They can make some plans, and they can do a lot on digitally, obviously, platform, but that's not really the whole point of having a festival. Is to bring people together physically and to make the connections, because it's so much easier. And that's why we cover festivals, because we get access to sometimes film stars that we wouldn't get to access to normally. And because we're there in the same place as these film stars, as these directors, and they are there to promote their work, then we get access. Whereas if we're in London and they're in Mumbai or they're in Los Angeles, it's so much more difficult. And there are so many different layers to get past. Whereas sometimes in some festivals, we can literally go up to them after a talk or a press conference and just say, are you available? I mean, it's not always that simple, but in some instances it is. And that's what makes going to festivals really, really great for us, because we get that kind of access. And it's also a great way to connect with other people who have other interests on a global level. So you're meeting people from all over the world, and you share the same passions and the same interests sometimes, and that really helps your footprint. And we have people who work for us now who live in France, who live in Germany, but we've met them through festivals, and they are interested in Indian cinema, and they cover it and report it, and they know we exist, and that's our audience. And so now they are contributors to ACV, even though they're not even English speakers, but they write, and I can always edit their work, and they're in the place that sometimes we can't be, so for practical reasons. So yeah, it kind of, that's the great thing about festivals, and that's why they're so important in a film calendar or music calendar or whatever culture, whatever aspect of culture you're interested in. Festivals are really amazing human events, and some of them bring thousands of people together, and sometimes hundreds of thousands of people. So yeah, we have lost something, but I don't think, I think in the slightly longer term, 2 to 3 years, there's a good chance that either there'll be a vaccine or the treatment will get better, or that there will be some level of much greater immunity. But I mean, it's all very unpredictable right now, and it's a little bit, but human ingenuity being what it is, I think we'll find a time.
Let us start with a bit of, I mean, very core things that I personally would like to know, and then perhaps Gronthee's audience would like to. So, you first, I mean, you began with core journalistic background, but your interest always remained in music, theater, cinema. Where did the interest grow from? Because I mean, whenever I can remember from the day I started, you were quite busy journalist. You were the editor of the Eastern Eye, and then you gave us time to meet only because you found the idea is great, because we were trying to merge and create a better communication to break the stereotype of Indian classical music. We're trying to. At that time, we were trying to develop some sort of unique productions, merging world poetry, giving visual interpretation through dance form, merging with Western classical music, and you found this idea as quite unique. And from your very busy schedule, you gave us time, you listened, and then you covered so beautifully in Eastern Eye. And then I realized we'll talk about SEB, because SEB became such a prestigious platform now. Everyone, I went to, by the way, I'm telling you, before Rachel Harris was leaving the position of artistic director at South Bank, and she joined now as UCL, as you know. So she was the artistic director of Alchemy Festival, and she was singing with the praise of your reports, because ACB, she always was quite a good admirer of Asian, and I felt so proud while she was talking about this, because our journey started almost at the similar time.
Yeah.
And showing, especially Rachel Harris, we wanted to reach to those areas which was deemed as their area. We were trying to invade those areas with our artistic vision. And then when I was listening to Rachel Harris, I felt really proud of Sailesh. So where did this interest grow from?
So
we'll talk about ACB after.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been interested in ideas and culture and cultural ideas, if you want to put it like that. And like you, I think the kind of Western definition of literature, philosophy, art, music, it's all quite separated. And yeah, if you go back 200, 250 years in the Indian subcontinent, the idea that they were different parts of art were quite unusual. I mean, that was not accepted. You had dance and music together. You had the whole ideas. They were expressions often of thinking, religious thinking sometimes, spirituality, intellectual politics. Everything was in a piece of music or a piece of dance. And that's what I was really drawn to. And in a way, that is still the kind of bedrock of Asian culture and why we cover so many categories.
Because lost you.
They come from the same tree.
Sailesh, can you hear us?
Tree of human knowledge and ideas.
Yeah.
Are you right there? Can you
we can hear you now.
Yeah.
A bit of loss. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Go on.
So obviously, as a publication, we have certain categories and certain areas, and that just makes it easy for somebody to navigate and follow what we're doing on the site. But more generally, we have this interest in ideas and a real passion for people who have new ideas and want to promulgate them, and philosophies that are generally what we feel bring people together, show us again our common humanity, that we have a lot more interest, a lot more common interests than things that push us apart or whatever. And so I think on that level, culture brings people together, and in the same way that festivals or Sauda brings people from different communities together for a shared passion. That's really what is at the heart of Asian Culture Vulture as well, because it's about people being interested in films or books or art or music and dance, and being interested in all of it and not just one aspect of it. And so we're very much a kind of an umbrella for all those different art forms. And obviously some people are keener on film than they may be on TV, but we regard TV, there's a lot of interesting programs that are on TV. They add to our culture. Some of them have quite considerable artistic merit and value. So we're not sniffy in that way. We want to kind of cover things that add to the conversation about our culture here in Britain, and obviously on a global context with a South Asian slant, obviously, and things that either have South Asian origins or involve prominent South Asian personalities, or have something to say about the physical place, India or Bangladesh or Pakistan, or Sri Lanka or Nepal, all those South Asian countries. But it's generally culture and ideas and really trying to initiate debates and get people to think about some things that some artists are also really wanting people to think about and maybe take action, like climate change. Something like that is a very massive subject and has been slightly derailed, perhaps you could say, by the current pandemic, but it's there in the background and we can't afford to ignore it or dismiss it, and I'm sure that when we come out of this crisis, it'll be back at the very top of our agenda. And again, there are a lot of artists who are talking about it and writing about it and want us to address it. And I think in that way, it's another, it's again about the ideas about how do we make this world a better place for everyone, not just a few people. And there are some communities who are going to be in a lot of trouble if we don't pay attention to the climate crisis that we all face. Again, we all face it. We can't avoid it. This is planet Earth, and we all live on it. And if we can't see the collective danger, then I despair about the human race in general. I mean, I'm more of an optimist, but I don't like people who are very nationalistic or say it's really just about us and we should just look after ourselves and forget everybody else. That's really, I can't. I don't find that an agreeable point of view, and I would argue with them that that's not helping anyone at the end of the day. But that's
Hi, Sailesh.
Live in. So
unfortunately, I could not read this book. I was searching for this book Amazon, but I did not find it.
Okay, well, it's quite old now, I have to admit. It's when it first came out, it was it went through a couple of print runs, and you can still find it in Amazon. You have to put my full name, Sailesh Ramakrishnan.
Yeah, that's fine. But as you were part from being a journalist,
yes,
also wrote a fiction for teenagers.
Yes.
Could you tell us a bit more on this?
So also I don't.
What he was asking actually, that
just asking.
Yeah, you are co-journalist, and then you wrote a beautiful fiction.
Well, it was slightly before I became a journalist. In some ways, I was not. There's a little bit of a story behind the book itself because it was commissioned, and what happened was that I'd always wanted to write, and I still want to write, and I still harbor ambitions to write novels, but finding the time and the space to do it is a little bit difficult right now, albeit that I'm a big believer that if you want to do it, you'll make the time, and I am slowly beginning to get back into that, but and the lockdown may have helped in that. But when I came out of college, I was very keen to write. I had a big trip to India with 3 university school friends, and I wrote a lot about it, and I was very, I was 22, 20, I was a pretty young guy. And then I showed it to somebody and they said, this is good, but this market is very saturated with travelogues. And at that time, people were writing about their experience. There wasn't any social media at that time. So people were really writing books about their travels and things like that. But he said, would you be interested in writing for teenagers? And I was, imaginative, and I thought, well, yes, I would be. And I remember pitching him some stories, and he liked I met the publishers, Mantra, and they liked the story and they commissioned it. And at that time they had a series, because even now there are not enough books with prominent Asian and Black characters. And at that time, this was a long way again, there were hardly any, and the Mantra really specialized in books for South Asian, especially young people. They did a lot of nursery and upwards, and this was their first sort of teenage. They did a teenage series. My book is one of 7, I think, in all that they did, and they wanted a couple which were more kind of male orientated, and the rest were very, the market at that time and the way people read, a lot of young girls tend to read more than boys, and so the books were very much pitched at the young women audience, and it's a great list of authors and great stories. I mean, I read, I think, nearly all the books in that series, and I was just one of two who came from male authors, and mine is a boy's own story in some ways. I use my journalistic experience to kind of craft a tale which is about a journalist, albeit he's involved in a very high level investigation. And I had some experience of investigative journalism going back again. And so I knew a lot of people who journalists, and there were a few of them who were involved in quite deep investigations, and so I had a little bit of background knowledge and all that, and I used my imagination to make a tale. And I had a lot of fun writing it. And at that time I didn't know it was going to be so many years later before I would even think about writing another one. But anyway, that's sometimes the way life gets in the way of certain things sometimes.
Right. Just asking, Sailesh, did you find the live streaming okay? I sent.
Sorry, yes, I've been.
WhatsApp, if you kindly.
Yes.
I was reading. Let me read some audience's comment. Gautam Rai from perhaps India said, "Good evening." Shahid Kais watching. Best wishes for the Gronthee. Many thanks to those who are watching. You can also leave any comment if you want. And then
Sure.
this live streaming, this session is streaming live from Shodha, from my profile, from Shamim Shan's profile, and
okay,
from the Gronthee. And
yeah,
it's available in Sailesh Ram's profile as well, or Asian Culture Vulture. You can share from there. And if you have any question, please do leave your question.
sure.
Sailesh.
Yes, I can see it now on the screen. And
yeah, if you, best if you kindly can share this.
I have shared it, but
You shared it. Oh, that's fine. That's great.
Share again. Where's the
No,
button?
it's not.
I've
Yeah.
clicked
So if
on
you,
the page and I've shared.
it hasn't been shared yet, but yeah. So you can copy and paste to your timeline actually. So that's easy. I sent this to WhatsApp. So from WhatsApp we can copy and paste. So, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, we are in conversation with a very prominent journalist and who covers predominantly South Asian arts here in the UK, and who is the founder of a very prestigious platform, AsianCultureVulture.com. You can, if you just Google it, you'll find the beautiful coverages that Sailesh has done so far, Sailesh and his team.
Just myself, I have to say. There are other people who contribute.
Sure.
I wouldn't want that to take the glory.
Yeah, so because before I move on to ACB, perhaps a very remarkable turn in your career. You decided to work for yourself, but because like Shamim Shan said, you have such a good access, actually good start with fiction writing, and then that book was also nominated for some award in Scotland.
Yes,
so that shows you have such a good start. So why did you stop writing fiction? Is it because you're busy with...
Let me explain. I didn't stop writing.
No, fiction. I'm talking about...
No. I very much wanted to, and I had started a couple of things. And as you know, sometimes you start a work and you don't follow it through. And then I ended up kind of writing a comedy novel. Really, it was a comic novel, and I was getting ready to I had an agent. I'd successfully managed to persuade somebody to represent me, and we were about to start approaching publishers. But there were a lot of changes in her firm. It was a mid-sized literary agency, and she decided that I think there was some politics, and she didn't really want to continue. And she left to look after a young family, and that left me back at square one, and I had to try and find another agent, and there was a bit of a process. One wanted to rewrite it quite a lot. I started to, but then I didn't really want to rewrite the whole thing. My heart wasn't really in rewriting the whole thing. I mean, I would have edited it and written it slightly differently, or changed some bits, but not. So now I don't know. And then a little bit further down the line, my parents died within 6 months of each other. That was a bit hard at the time. I didn't really. It took some time to get over that, and I'd started editing GD2 Life then, which was a little bit of a dream. I went to AMG with the ambition to edit such a magazine, to be the editor of such a magazine, and I was recruited on that basis, really. And it took a while for it to come because it was such a big project for AMG, and it was their dream too. And all that happened in 2006, and then I got really tied back into my journalism, thrown back into my journalism, and I was doing what I really wanted to do journalistically, being the editor of a lifestyle magazine, and it was great, and it's still the best. Obviously,
exactly.
Not as good as ATV, that's my own thing, but as far as working for somebody else goes, that was the best working experience of my life. And AMG, I really, I have a lot to be thankful for them for going on that journey with me, and for we really wanted to make it work, but I think the time, it was a little bit, there wasn't all this social media around in the same way that there is now, and had we started a little bit later, we probably would have been okay. But 2006, it was really tough to break into a market. It's a declining market more generally, print magazines and print in general. Everybody's up against the same.
That was my actually question that I was trying to start with actually, because when we started Shoda, as you can remember, we wanted to present global music actually in different way.
Yeah.
So although we are saying Indian classical music, but we had a vision of internationalism, and we tried to merge with different art forms. Say, for instance, we have done something like sort of integration of Isaac Levitan through Indian classical music. So Isaac Levitan, as you know, a wonderful Russian Lithuanian painter. And he has such a great followers in terms of his melancholic, for his melancholic painting of mood, landscapes of mood. And then we tried to develop some sort of connection, some sort of subtle connection with this art form, with Indian classical music. And then audience perhaps will come, this is the vision, audience perhaps would come to watch the beauty of Isaac Levitan, and then they will go back with a beat of melody of Indian classical music. So that's how we try to merge audiences from different cultures, merge the art form of different cultures. And when you started Asian culture, Vulture, I can relate. I was thinking whether you knew before that printing media is going to be at stake, going to be at risk immediately. And then you cleverly took a decision. Well, printing media, like we all know now, unless you have a digital platform, no matter what prestigious printing media you have, you are at the risk. And then I was just thinking whether you managed to assume the future of printing media about 7 years ago, and then it started a great journey, Asian culture, Vulture. And then if you look at the site, it's so soothing site, and so so high standard stories, high standard articles you cover. especially in relation to South Asian arts. So can you tell us a bit more on the fact that whether you knew that printing media is declining?
Well,
At
I think
time you
it was, having been right at the coalface with a weekly newspaper, an Eastern Eye, and then with GD2 Life, I knew the internet was slowly encroaching. Yeah, this is going nearly 15, more than 15 years now, and at that time, the internet was there, but it was quite basic in many ways from where we are now. And nobody would have thought we could be doing this kind of thing back then. And I think I had an awareness, definitely, and I think it wasn't a secret by any means. You could see what was happening with the advertising revenue, sales, and how hard it was to get people to buy publications. And the internet was kind of starting and beginning. Facebook was really starting to make inroads in people's lives. And I can remember telling people off for looking on Facebook, when they were supposed to be working and they were just browsing on Facebook. Now, of course, I've been telling them to going on to Facebook and share like you're sharing. And, it's so important that social media, that we have that kind of social media traction. But at that time, it was very recreational. It wasn't really about work. They didn't even have business pages at that time. It was just your personal account. And it was people were really posting stuff about what they were up to. Now, the way Facebook has changed that they understood how to make money from that model, and put advertising and business at kind of the heart of that whole operation. And it's changed out of all recognition, and from its very beginning. And similarly, I could just see that when I left in 2012, when I left the Eastern Eye being editor, I could see there was a shift, and the shift had really, that was it. We weren't going to go back to buying lots of general newspapers. I think there is still a place for specialist publications, and I don't rule out the possibility in some future point of maybe doing an Asian Culture Vulture quarterly or something like that. But that's still a bit of a way off. And my love of kind of pictures and words and magazines hasn't gone. So I still do have an ambition, but that's quite a long way off right now. But yeah, I could see what was happening, and I think I was trying to grasp that the kind of the giganticness of what was happening. It was hard to really see how far it would come, but I had some sense that the world was really changing in front of our computers. The world with our computers was going to be completely different, and so it has proved. And I really wanted to try. I knew, I did think about publication. I had been in India researching a possible setting up a publication there. I spent time in Mumbai, and my business partner and myself were quite keen at one point. And at that time, when we were in India, advertising revenues in print in India were still increasing. Of course, within 2 years, that kind of changed, and I'm glad we didn't go. I mean, we both. I ended up being on Eastern Eye, and my business partner also. He got a kind of career changing job for him, and that rather took the kind of. And we knew we'd have to raise money and all that, and this was not long after the global crash as well, and we knew it was going to be very, very difficult to raise money to get something off the ground for India, and the market had changed quite a lot in the short time from when I arrived in India with the idea and the whole research phase to kind of leaving the global crash. And even though India wasn't really badly affected, the climate and the whole mood had changed completely, and people were not really looking to invest in media at that time. And maybe digital media, but that was not what we were looking at that time. And then that kind of slightly fed into my thinking when I came back, and then I started on Eastern Eye. The web was still there, and we were trying to do that a little bit on Eastern Eye, and it was always challenging. You know, it's an old AMG is a very well-established publishing group that has a stable of very successful magazines, and you were asking for a big culture shift to suddenly move to digital operation. Now, obviously, myself on my own creating something like Asian Culture, I can do that very, very quickly and easily. And we've seen other similar publications, other similar businesses come online and really flourish, whereas older businesses who have more different types of business models, it's very difficult for them. And look at what's happening now with a lot of live venues. They cannot. It's very difficult without an audience, without customers, and being able to welcome customers to their doors. It's almost impossible to function, and that's why it's very important that the government rescue package that's been announced today or yesterday will help them. But there's still, you know, until we can get those venues up and running and people can go to them safely, and we can kind of mingle with some limitations, shall we say, we don't know how that will turn out, and what the future is for that kind of life. I mean, I really miss going to the theatre. Now you can go to the cinema, but you can't go to the theatre, which seems a bit peculiar. I know there are differences, but it seems a great shame. And the same with music and concerts. And I do miss that social aspect of our cultural life a lot. And I'm not sure when it's going to come back, but we have to get through this as a health crisis primarily, and then once it's safe to mix socially again or socialize, then I think we'll be better for it. But we have to wait and see.
Right, let us ask you the question. Me, so many times, Sailesh, many times. So let me take my revenge. Let me take my revenge on you. Asian Culture, to be honest, became at the forefront of Asian art, especially Asian arts in general. People who like to know about Asian arts, they perhaps at least watch or read those stories. And I was, like I said, I was feeling so proud of you when I saw that Rachel Harris, perhaps you covered about alchemy year before it did the last one. That's how, I mean, you managed to do so many meaningful collaborations with so many wonderful festivals, so many wonderful organizations. And that perhaps was the key, was the driving force for Asian Culture to connect.
Alchemy was tremendous in that it brought a number of different art forms under one umbrella, which obviously film festivals and music festivals, they're about music or they're about films. But this had pretty much everything and a bit of everything. That's not, again, to everyone's taste, but it's a great way to introduce new artists and new shows. And it was a great,
especially new production. Yeah, we did. Remember, we did something called Bengali opera, which was quite new in the West, and then you were the one, first who covered this with huge attention. And when I started in our digital platforms,
I could see your ambition in that idea. And it's great to revive some things which are maybe slightly dying because the economics don't quite work for it, or if there's a way of making them work, we should try. And I think you were doing that, and the whole idea again, this idea of music and dance being slightly separate is not really, that's not really our culture. So, we want to kind of break that down and say, look, this is how it is. This is the way you enjoy it, and not be worried about whether it's music or whether it's dance, and be slightly inhibited or restricted by the kind of Western classification that you have dance, you have music, that they're separate art forms and they shouldn't really. I don't really, I think it's there to be create. You can be creative and develop something, and if it's looking back or looking forward, why not? And,
but the question that I was about to ask you, Sailesh, that if you, for example, the question you ask everyone, if you would like to perhaps ask the editor of the Gronthee, you always start with a question: what is the future vision of Gronthee, perhaps? And you asked me many times, what is the future vision of show?
Yes.
So I would like to ask you now, because you made so many meaningful collaborations. You became a well-known platform to artists now, to many prestigious organizations, many prestigious festivals. But what is the future vision of Asian culture?
So really, for us, it's to make the site to reach more people, and to develop. We're still developing on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. We want to do some things which perhaps not film related, but that's we have become a little bit more of a film channel. But in time we want to broaden it to cover more music and art, visual art. I'm a great fan, if you can put it like that, of visual art. I love going to galleries, and there are a lot of fantastic South Asian artists both here and obviously in the.
If I forget, you are also co-writer of a screenplay, perhaps, of the film called.
Yes, I have writing ambitions.
That shows your profound interest in visual art.
So yeah, I mean, I had a work colleague who was actually a director, and we kind of, our interests were very similar, and he had a story. English was not, Bengali is his first language, and so English is my first language, so I helped him write a story, and we're still looking to place it with someone. It's set in London, and it's a kind of thriller, and it's about a group of people who are caught out by the financial crash in 2008 and do some naughty things, shall we say. And yeah, well, I had a lot of fun writing it. And yeah, I mean, I'd like to write creatively in that area, but novels still come.
Do you think Asian culture vulture perhaps in a journey to engaging a journey to make film, or sort of a publishing book or something like this?
Yeah, look, I think Asian culture vulture will, not Asian culture vulture itself, because that's really we are a media, and we could make documentaries, certainly, and we do want to make documentaries, and we're looking maybe at artist journeys and doing longer interviews with artists. But there is the company side, the big talent media, which is also which Asian Culture Vulture is part of. Yeah, I mean, I would love to make drama at some point, produce work, not just my own, but other people's. Again, there's a lot of talent there which isn't really being promoted, or isn't being given the platform that it deserves. And I think when we're in a position to do that, really want to do that. Now, at the moment, my journey is with Asian Culture Vulture website and our YouTube channel. And slowly, as things grow, my hope is that we can branch out and start to do drama. But that's still that's a bit of a way right now. We're still building the website, we're still building the YouTube channel, but don't my ambition is to definitely do that, to make big talent media like a producer that can produce all these different kind of artistic or cultural works ourselves, and help other people. It's not about myself, but about other people who we think deserve a wider audience, and their work needs to be out there. And that's what we're doing on Asian Culture Vulture to a great extent as well. It's really about people like yourself and Sauda. It's a great organization, tremendous ideas behind it. And similarly, there are artists now, and I come across them nearly every day, who deserve that our attention. And that's partly what, not just partly, but it's a lot of what we do as Asian Culture Vulture, and not just myself, my other contributors, always looking for talented people who are putting on plays or writing books or making films, their first films. And that's an important part of the whole process and of what we do at Asian Culture Vulture. There are a few people who we've been lucky enough to interview very early in their journey, and now they're incredible. They're in places you would never imagine when we first.
Would it be possible to talk about, because obviously you have almost like first-hand experience of observing many artists grow here, many organizations grow here in last perhaps 7 years. You interviewed them, you saw them from very close point of view. What did you think of them? Would you think they deserve to get the global attention, not just from South Asian background? Just you're talking about the global stage.
I mean, there are two people who come to mind who I interviewed very early in their journeys. One, probably the most famous, is she now has a show on network TV, on American TV. The name is slightly evaded me right now. And there's another artist called Suki Singapura, who is a burlesque artist who I interviewed in London back in 2014 through Sunny and Shay, who have a BBC presenters, and they kindly introduced me to her. And she now she was part of a Netflix show in Singapore, Singapore Social, and she attended Elton John's Oscar party, and an incredible journey from, and we're going to be doing a feature interview shortly, which she told me she learned her burlesque from watching YouTube videos, and she just decided to go professional when I interviewed her in 2014, and now she's a kind of global star. You should look at her Instagram. There's hundreds of thousands of followers, and she had a few thousand, I think, when I first interviewed her. And it's an incredible journey, and I was lucky enough to be there very early on. Thanks to Sunny and Shay, they introduced me to her and said she was somebody with talent and was going places, and she was, and she proved it completely. It's a fantastic story, really.
Thank you, Sailesh. We are approaching to the end, actually. So what would you think about the future of arts, especially after this pandemic or during this pandemic?
So,
because you perhaps see the government's effort from a very closer point of view.
Yeah, I think it's, I don't think it's necessarily what the government, I mean, obviously with venues and the physical spaces that art takes place in, yes, that is a very practical issue, and the government has to address it. And there are a lot of artists who are struggling, and they need help and our assistance, definitely.
Exactly.
But in a wider context, I'm really hoping that we don't simply go back to what it was like before, and that we remember this terrible thing that's happened, and we remember our common humanity, and that we have a little bit of a reset, and that we are kinder and gentler and more compassionate, and that we are more interested in people and ideas that we can all benefit from. and that will make the world a better place, and that we can enjoy music and books and dance and whatever art form it is, and not feel restricted or negative or in any way like we need to get one over somebody or any stupid things like that. I mean, yes, there's a certain degree of competition, but in anything, but let it be kind of friendly, and let's push ourselves to do better and to be better. And that's really what we're all, certainly what I'm striving to do, and what ACV is striving to do. And I think that's, and not in a way that we want to trample on anyone or offend people or upset them or anything like that. We want to take people on a journey and make it an enjoyable and valuable experience for everyone along the way. And that's, and I hope that's what art will, and I think art is telling us, it's helped us to get through. I mean, God knows where we'd be without being able to watch stuff on our screens. You know, we'd all be mad, because that's kept me sane in some ways, is that I can watch a lot. And you know, some people have, some organizations like yourselves have been doing a lot in this area, and growing your audiences and developing connections. And you know, broadcasters and other people have done a really great job in helping us get through, because without this kind of cultural production, we all would have struggled, and we all probably would have gone mad. But the fact that there are so many different things out there that we can access that before were not available in the same way, I think has really helped. And I hope that continues even after, and that at some level that we can connect people globally. That's the beautiful thing about what you're doing now, and what some other, you know, through Zoom and other platforms, where previously, and especially like physical festivals, obviously you have to be there to experience it. But there's a case for opening it up online, so that other people from wherever they are in the world can get a little bit of that experience, or enjoy something which they would never be able to go to Cannes possibly, or Toronto, or wherever it is, or you know, attend Souther's concerts, you know, but because they're sitting in front of a computer or on a phone, and they might be in the outback somewhere, but because they got a phone, they can enjoy something and watch it and experience the same thing that we are experiencing in London or wherever it is. And that, I think, I'd like that to continue beyond this health crisis, because I think that shows us the world is a smaller place, and that we have things in common with people, you know, wherever they are and whatever background they are or whatever. So, and it helps us to make connections, and again, you know, fuses that common humanity. And we can go forward. I think we're stronger together than apart. So anything that helps us bring us together is always good, I think, and worth supporting.
So Sailesh, many thanks for your time. Would you like to add anything, because that is also one among my interests as well, the way you developed meaningful collaboration with even, that's what I saw you doing in British Film Institute, NFT, National Film Theatre last year, London Indian Film Festival, and then you covered Cannes Film Festival, many major festivals of the world. Would you like to add something on this, your experience perhaps, or the way you developed your collaboration before we go to that? And then I really like the way, remember our friendship started from philosophy actually, because you like the way I mentioned about Derrida, because I class myself as the spiritual disciple of Derrida. And if the art has to, because art has to develop and then find its own way to generate. And Derrida is the one who developed a phenomenal way to interpret art, and then develop different dimensions of the art forms. and your own interpretation of the art forms. And then Shodha was uh, created to develop sort of many different dimensional interpretations. The Gronthee is delighted actually to have you as part of the series. And Gronthee Gronthee started his journey with, I can remember about 30 years ago, with Derrida's translations.
Wow.
We tried to, about 30 years ago, Gronthee was the platform for new writing, experimental voices.
Fantastic.
And then we found Derrida as our shelter, because Derrida said any interpretation. Derrida actually encouraged different meaning of the same words. And then we tried to project that. I would have tried to preach that idea through our writings. So if you can tell us a bit more on the collaborations, if you or anything would like to add on Asian culture, Vulture.
Well, I've been warned before about talking too much about philosophy, so you're giving me no, that's what really struck. I wasn't expecting ever really to talk about Derrida in what I was doing very early on, and in journalism in general, really. Even though cultural journalism, I would expect that a few artists have probably engaged and read Derrida, but I was really delighted and really impressed that Ahmed, you talked about Derrida and brought it up in your whole explanation of what Souther was about and what you were trying to do, and I'm sure with the Gronthee as well. I'm hearing now that he's been a big influence on you. I mean, I liked him as a student very much, and a lot of the things he was saying, the kind of post-structuralist thinkers that I did a lot in my MA, they were really about breaking down barriers. And again, there's a wonderful essay. I think it's I can't remember which, White Mythologies it's called. I don't know whether you've come across it, which is a fantastic. It's quite technical, even in English translation, but it's a brilliant dissection of Western philosophy and the way that sometimes Western philosophy is the way other types of thinking and puts itself at the center of human civilization, which is not really totally accurate or correct, but and is slightly subversive. And he always had a subversive intent as a writer and a philosopher, and I don't think he would deny that. But I had the great thrill of seeing him in London once, and it was I've got a signed book, and it's one of my most prized possessions. And he died not long after I saw him, actually. And it's again, great, incredible ideas, very a really interesting way of looking at the world, and him and their whole group of thinkers like him who really changed a lot of thinking and intellectual life, really, in that kind of late 80s, early 90s, right through. Maybe not talked about much now, but at that time, I think, if you're doing English or philosophy, then these were big figures. I mean, European philosophy, not excuse me, not what we would say is Anglo-American philosophy, because in the UK there are two traditions. One is Anglo-American and one is European, and Anglo-American is still probably the larger one, whereas European was very small then, and maybe slightly larger now. I don't know academically where it got to, but the demarcation was very clear, and the Anglo-American was definitely in the ascendancy still, and they didn't. I don't know whether people may not respond. I'm old enough to remember the controversy about Derrida not getting an honorary degree from Oxford or Cambridge. I can't remember exactly who it was, but there were a lot of professors who didn't think it was philosophy. They just thought it was writing, or I don't know what they would call it. They were very sniffy about it and not very complimentary. But really, it's about human thought and the way that thought has influenced practice, you know, and the way we treat even other people. And some of it is apparent now, and people may not know the intellectual origins of it, but it's deeply rooted in some in a move towards, you know, treating people, of all people, or whatever background or whatever designation you may confer on them, with respect, and allowing them expression, I guess, at some level. Yes.
So many thanks, Sailesh, for this insightful talk, actually.
Well, I hope
And many thanks for your time. Many thanks for managing your time, actually, from your really busy schedule. I'm sure it was equally insightful for the audiences
thank you so much
managed to
asking me.
view and watch this session. Shamushan, have you got any concluding note to add? You are on mute, please. You are on mute. If you kindly unmute yourself.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot, Shailesham, for
you.
your insightful talk.
Thank you.
Actually, no hard time. Many thanks.
Thank you.
Many thanks to my friend, brother, one of the major pillar of the Gronthee poet, T.M. Ahmed Kaisar.